At 2:13 in the morning, 6 silver tanker trucks rolled through the broken gate of Eli Mercer's Wisconsin farm. One by one, their valves opened. A thick white river of sour-smelling whey spilled across his south field, rushing between the empty crop, rows, and moving dangerously close to the creek. Eli stood beside his tractor, unable to believe what he was seeing. Near the gate, dairy plant manager Grant Voss watched with his hands inside his coat pockets. By sunrise, Grant said calmly, "This land won't be worth the debt on it." Eli thought he was watching 4 generations of family history being destroyed. He had no idea the waste flooding his farm would soon make him a millionaire. 3 months earlier, the Mercer farm was already close to collapse. Eli was 46 years old, widowed, and raising his 16-year-old daughter, Hannah, alone. The farmhouse had belonged to the Mercer family for 4 generations. Its porch boards creaked, the red barn leaned slightly toward the east, and the empty milk house still carried the faint smell of cattle feed and disinfectant. Eli had sold the family's last dairy cows to pay his wife Laura's medical bills. Now he had only 80 acres, an aging John Deere tractor, and a promise he had made beside Laura's hospital bed. "Don't let grief make you sell what love built," she had whispered. But love did not stop bank payments. The bank had given Eli 90 days to catch up on his loan. If he failed, the farm would be auctioned. The Mill Creek dairy processing plant sat less than a mile away. Its management wanted Eli's south field for a wastewater storage pond. Grant Voss offered enough money to clear Eli's debt and leave him with a small amount to start somewhere else. Hannah believed they should accept it. "We could move to Madison," she said one evening. "You could find steady work. I could start over." Eli folded Grant's offer and placed it on the kitchen table. "Your mother asked me to protect what this family built." Hannah looked toward her mother's empty chair. "Mom also wanted us to live." Neither of them spoke for the rest of dinner. The following morning, Eli found bright orange survey stakes planted inside his fence. Someone had entered the property without permission and marked almost 20 acres of his land. Eli pulled every stake from the ground, threw them into the back of his pickup, and drove directly to the dairy plant. He dropped them on Grant's office desk. "Take the offer," Grant said. "That farm stopped being a real farm when your cows left." Eli leaned forward. "Then stay off land that doesn't belong to you." Grant's smile disappeared. 90 days goes fast, Mercer." Eli left without answering. But Grant's warning remained in his mind. 2 nights later, someone cut the chain on Eli's south gate. Nothing appeared to be missing, but deep tanker tracks had been pressed into the soft dirt road. Eli called the county sheriff. The deputy photographed the tracks, but said there was not enough evidence to identify who had entered the property. Grant called the incident a coincidence. Hannah said almost nothing. But later that evening, Eli noticed several of her books packed inside cardboard boxes. She was preparing to leave before the farm was even gone. The next afternoon, a rusted Subaru stopped in front of the farmhouse. The driver was Ruth Delaney, a 68-year-old widow who had spent most of her career working for the county agricultural extension office. She asked Eli to show her the abandoned milk house. Inside, she studied the drainage channels, concrete floor, water pipes, and ventilation fans. Then she opened a canvas bag. "Your wife called me last year," Ruth said. She removed a notebook wrapped in clear plastic. Eli immediately recognized Laura's handwriting. The pages contained drawings of shelves, humidity measurements, mushroom varieties, and plans for converting the milk house into a growing facility. On one page, Laura had written, "Whey, not waste if handled right." Eli stared at the notebook. She wanted to grow mushrooms? Ruth nodded. She was studying whether diluted whey could be safely used as a nutrient supplement in a straw and sawdust growing mixture. Laura believed the abandoned milk house could be converted into a controlled mushroom facility. But several pages had been torn from the back of the notebook. Eli ran his fingers across the damaged binding. "Who removed these?" Ruth glanced toward the dairy plant beyond the south field. That's what worried her. Before she could explain further, Eli's phone rang. It was the bank. The bank officer informed Eli that his payment deadline had been moved forward. Someone had filed an environmental complaint claiming Eli was illegally storing dairy waste on his land. Until the investigation was resolved, the bank considered the farm a greater financial risk. Eli had never stored a single gallon of dairy waste. By Friday, a county environmental inspector was walking along the creek. The inspector found no contamination. But near the property line, he discovered a newly buried metal pipe. The pipe ran from the direction of the dairy plant and pointed directly toward Eli's drainage ditch. Grant claimed it was an abandoned line. Ruth rubbed the clean metal with her thumb. This pipe wasn't here last winter. That afternoon, Grant returned to the Mercer farmhouse with a new purchase agreement. The amount was lower than his first offer. Environmental complaints damage property value, Grant explained. Eli remained standing on the porch. Funny how the complaint appeared after your survey stakes. Grant held out the contract. You're drowning, Mercer. I'm offering you a rope. Eli looked past him toward the plant. No, you're waiting to buy the pond. Grant placed the agreement on the porch railing. You'll sign eventually. Then he drove away. That night, Hannah entered the kitchen and placed her phone on the table. She had recorded two men talking near the south fence while she was walking home from the school bus. Eli pressed play. Grant's voice came through clearly. Once the discharge is documented, the bank will panic. Then he'll sign. A second voice answered, but it was faint. Eli replayed the recording. Then he played it again. The voice sounded like his younger brother, Caleb. Caleb had not visited the farm since Laura's funeral. He had always believed Eli received the better share of their father's inheritance. Eli called Caleb immediately. Caleb denied being anywhere near the dairy plant. You're hearing what you want to hear, he said. Grant is trying to take the farm. Then take his money before you lose everything. Why would you help him? There was a long silence on the phone. I'm not helping anyone, Caleb finally replied. Then he ended the call. But Caleb's hesitation told Eli more than his words. Eli searched through the old barn office where his father had stored deeds, tax documents, and equipment records. Behind a warped wooden drawer, he discovered a folded legal agreement. The document supposedly gave the dairy plant permission to spread emergency wastewater on the Mercer farm. At the bottom was Eli's signature. It looked almost correct, but Laura had circled the signing date in red ink. On that date, Eli had been in Milwaukee during Laura's surgery. Someone had forged his name. Beneath, it was the witness signature. Caleb Mercer. Before Eli could take the document to the sheriff, the tankers arrived. It was 2:13 in the morning. Their headlights swept across the farmhouse windows as 6 trucks entered through the cut gate. Eli ran outside while Hannah called 911. Ruth, who lived nearby, raced toward the farm in her Subaru. By the time Eli reached the field, thousands of gallons of whey were already pouring onto the ground. Grant stood near his pickup holding the forged agreement. You authorized emergency land application, he said. Your brother witnessed it. The white liquid was moving toward the creek. If it reached the water, Eli could face cleanup costs, penalties, and the complete loss of his farm. Eli climbed onto his tractor. Grant shouted at him to stop. Eli lowered the blade and drove directly across the field. What are you doing? Grant yelled. Saving my farm from your paperwork. Eli cut a deep trench through the soil, redirecting the whey away from the creek. Ruth opened an old irrigation channel leading toward an abandoned manure lagoon lined with heavy clay. Hannah dragged sandbags from the barn and placed them along the lowest section of the field. For hours, they fought the flow. By sunrise, the creek remained clear, but the south field was soaked and thousands of gallons of whey sat inside the old lagoon. 2 days later, the bank froze Eli's loan while the dumping incident was investigated. Then, shortly before midnight, flames appeared inside the old milk house. The volunteer fire department arrived in time to save the building, but the walls were blackened and Laura's experimental wooden shells were destroyed. Hannah stood in the muddy yard holding Laura's scorched notebook against her chest. Let go, Dad, she said. Eli looked at the smoking building. I can't. I already lost Mom. I don't want this farm to take you too. Her words finally broke through his stubbornness. Inside the farmhouse, Eli sat at the kitchen table with soot covering his hands. I'm scared, he admitted. Maybe I keep calling it loyalty because selling feels like failing your mother. Hannah placed the damaged notebook in front of him. Then don't save the farm because you're afraid. Eli raised his eyes. Save it because there's something here worth building. For the first time, Eli understood that protecting the farm did not mean keeping everything exactly as it had been. It meant giving the land a future. Ruth contacted a former colleague at a Wisconsin university. Together, they tested samples from the lagoon and created a safe method for using small amounts of diluted and heat-treated whey as a nutrient supplement. They mixed it with pasteurized straw and hardwood sawdust. Eli cleaned the damaged milk house and installed temporary shelves. Their first 20 mushroom bags developed green mold. The second batch dried out. A severe storm knocked out the power and ruined the third attempt. Every failure cost money Eli did not have. But Laura's notes suggested one final adjustment. Eli needed a larger boiler and better humidity controls. The only valuable item he had left was his father's restored pickup truck. He had promised himself he would never sell it. But the bank auction was approaching. Eli ran his hand along the truck's hood, then handed the keys to a buyer. With the money, he purchased used equipment and repaired the milk house. Hannah built a simple website for their new business. She named it Mercer Moon Mushrooms after the full moon Laura used to watch from the farmhouse porch. Then they waited. On the 43rd day, Hannah entered the milk house and stopped. Clusters of white oyster mushrooms had opened across the growing bags like small fans. "Dad," she whispered. Eli stepped inside. For several seconds, he could not speak. Their first harvest filled 12 wooden crates. A chef from Green Bay purchased every one. 2 grocery cooperatives placed weekly orders. Then a nearby school district asked whether Mercer Moon Mushrooms could eventually supply mushroom-based food for student lunches. For the first time, the farm appeared to have a future. But the bank auction was still scheduled for October 3rd. Eli needed $68,000 to stop the auction. The mushroom business was growing, but it could not produce that amount before the deadline. Grant returned with one final contract. "Sign today," he said, "and I'll let you lease the farmhouse for 1 year." Eli held the pen. For a moment, he considered accepting. Then Hannah noticed the logo printed on Grant's pen. It belonged to Caleb's construction company. Why would Caleb help a dairy plant steal access to land he did not own? And why had Laura torn pages from her notebook before she died? Ruth returned to the burned milk house and searched every wall, drawer, and cabinet. Behind a loose electrical panel, she found a sealed plastic envelope. Inside were the notebooks, missing pages. Laura had copied dairy plant hauling records. She had photographed illegal nighttime dumping. She had also traced payment from Grant to Caleb's struggling construction company. But the final page revealed something even worse. Grant had not created the plan. Caleb had. Years earlier, Eli and Caleb's father had loaned Caleb nearly $200,000 to save his construction company. In exchange, Caleb had signed an agreement giving up any future claim against Eli's farm. Caleb later became convinced that Eli had received everything while he had been left with debt. He approached Grant with a plan. They would forge Eli's permission, contaminate the south field, frighten the bank, and force Eli to sell cheaply. Grant would get the land for his wastewater pond. Caleb would receive the construction contract. Laura had discovered the scheme before her illness became worse. That was why she hid the evidence. On the morning of October 3rd, farmers, neighbors, reporters, and investors gathered outside the county courthouse. Grant stood beside a land agent, confident that he would soon own the Mercer farm. Eli carried Laura's evidence inside a brown envelope. Grant approached him privately. "Take my deal," he said. "Your debt disappears. Your daughter gets a fresh start, and everything else stays buried." Eli knew the evidence could destroy Grant and send Caleb to prison. But accepting the offer would save the farm immediately. Then a sheriff's vehicle stopped beside the courthouse. Caleb stepped out. Caleb looked exhausted. His eyes were lowered, and his hands trembled. "I was tired of being the one Dad never trusted," Caleb said. "I thought you got everything." Eli held up their father's old agreement. "You got help. I got responsibility. Neither of us got what we thought." Caleb looked toward the sheriff. "Are you going to send me to prison?" Eli thought about Laura, Hannah, and the neighbors who had spent the previous night packing mushroom orders. Forgiveness did not mean hiding the truth. "I'm going to tell the truth," Eli said. What happens next depends on what you do with yours. Caleb slowly nodded. Then he confessed. The sheriff arrested Grant for fraud, illegal dumping, conspiracy, and involvement in the milkhouse fire. Caleb admitted forging the agreement and helping plan the contamination. The dairy plant's corporate owners faced an environmental investigation, a lawsuit, and the possibility of being shut down. With only 11 minutes remaining before the auction, the company agreed to pay for the cleanup, cancel the fraudulent claims, and fund a legal waste reuse pilot with Mercer moon mushrooms. The bank suspended the sale. The Mercer farm was saved, but not without a price. 1 year later, the abandoned milk house contained 6 climate-controlled growing rooms. The old barn was filled with oyster, lion's mane, and chestnut mushrooms. Nearby dairy plants paid Eli to accept controlled amounts of processed whey under strict permits. What had once been expensive waste became part of a profitable growing system. Ruth became the company's quality director. Hannah enrolled in a nearby college to study agricultural business. She stayed close to home, not because she felt trapped, but because she wanted to help build what came next. Caleb served time for his role in the fraud. After his release, he returned to the farm to complete court-ordered restitution. He built growing shelves, repaired drainage channels, and worked quietly beside Eli. The brothers did not repair their relationship in one emotional conversation. Trust returned slowly. It came through early mornings, honest work, unpaid debts, and promises that were finally kept. Forgiveness was not forgetting what Caleb had done. It was giving him the chance to become someone different. By the 3rd year, Mercer moon mushrooms had passed $1 million in annual sales. Restaurants, grocery stores, schools, and farm markets purchased mushrooms grown inside the building that someone had once tried to burn down. Eli framed Laura's scorched notebook above his office desk. He left it open to one sentence. Nothing on a farm is useless until someone stops looking for its purpose. The dairy plant had tried to drown Eli's inheritance in waste. Instead, he turned waste into work, betrayal into truth, and an empty barn into a future his daughter wanted to inherit. Sometimes the thing meant to ruin your land becomes the very thing that teaches it how to live again. What would you have done in Eli's place? Accepted the money, exposed the truth, or turned the disaster into something new? Share your answer in the comments, and subscribe to Harvest of Grit for more unforgettable American farm stories about family, courage, hard work, and second chances.